Alright, hello. We are going to try and do what should be easy and switch over to the actual stream. I'm going to guess the audio is going to cut out, and we're going to have to do a little bit of fuckery to get things to actually work again. So, let me just pause a couple things in OBS here. Alright, so let's see here. Where is this? Main content capture? Get out of here. We don't... Wait, what? Hold on. That's not even capturing the right... How is the audio playing if it's not capturing the same window? Anyways, do that. Go over here to stream layout. Alright, good. And now, audio testing. We're gonna see if we can't get any more of this to actually play. I'm seeing nothing in OBS. Hello, Zerter. Greetings. It's been a while. Happy to see you here again. I'm currently having audio issues, so I need to figure out how to get this OBS to play nice. So my attention may be distracted for a little bit until I can get things working. It was working right before stream, and then... Oh, oops. And then it started not working right before stream. Playing Mag Memo 3 again? Oh, sweet. Currently at tier 2, it's so long. Yeah, well, they get better. Okay, so, hold on. Obviously, it's capturing on the desktop. You have microphone aux, that's capturing. Main content window is no longer capturing for some reason. But back on the BRB screen, a different one was working. I'm trying to break out the two-screen layout today, hence why audio is being a bit iffy. So if I then... Okay, what if I redid this? Okay, well, no, that one's fine. That one's doing nothing else. If I reopen this, then the audio... Oh, it didn't actually reopen. Okay, well, the audio is no longer coming back. Right, that makes sense, because I have it capturing something different. What if I... just make it double capture? Yeah, that looks pretty. Okay, hold on. Maybe if I just make a new window, a new capture window, it'll decide to start working. Wait, what? Hold on. Why was it capturing audio when I had it on Windows Explorer? Oh, oh god, this is peak scuff. It's peak scuff, guys. Am I a real VTuber yet? Maybe. Captured already, damn it. Why is it not? Okay. We're getting rid of this, and we're just making a new capture window. New window capture, Firefox temp. Yeah, do that. It's getting the audio at least. Where is it? I'm not seeing it in OBS. That's not a good sign. Soundboard, mic audio. Bonus alerts. No, that's not it. Where is it? Why is it not even showing up now? Oh, bloody hell. Desktop audio. Why is it not working? Audio. What if I just reopen this? Oh, okay. I can get it to work this way. That's extremely roundabout, but all right, fine. If it wants to capture audio this way, now let me balance against Icebrain once more, and we'll see how loud it is. Okay, I think that's fine. All right, success! Finally, yay! Okay, now I just have to realign this so that way it actually lines up with the background. I don't know... Well, actually, wait a minute. No, I don't, because if this isn't working, then I can just pop open the original that is aligned, show my stuff again, whatever. I'll have to go back and look at things. Wrong one. There we go. Oh my god, finally. Finally, we can get to the actual stream. Hooray! Okay, so... Alright, so... my introduction is an absolute shambles. I told myself that yesterday I probably should have came home from work and, you know, tested everything to make sure this wouldn't have happened a total disaster today. But, one, I was tired. Two, I kinda had to do a cleanse with a bunch of prunes, if you catch my... If you follow the Crash Icarus story, you know what happens when I mention prunes. So I took the entire night to, clean out. And, yeah, I didn't really have time to unscuff things for today. But now, it's working. It was working right before stream and then OBS crashed, but it's working again now. And you know what? Honestly, I'll take the win at this point. Yeah, the mega shit. Exactly. That's what you get when you defeat Scatman. John. Alright. Well, anyhow. So, tonight's stream is unusual. I'm not really one for the reaction content, kind of game. But I do love the USCSB series of videos, United States Chemical Safety Board. If for some reason you're clicking on this video without having any idea of what I'm talking about, I'll explain it again. The United States Chemical Safety Board is a government department of the great United States of America, and they produce shockingly high-quality videos going over select industrial chemical accidents. I mean, accidents is a generous term, but that's what they call them. Disasters is what I like to say. And they capture the attention of even non-chemists and non-lab safety type people because their video structure ends up being very true crime-like in a way, and it's because they're trying to get down to the bottom of really what happened at a certain place. So, as a result, they end up being very kind of exposition-y. They tell you kind of, you know, what was happening on a certain day, a certain time, you know, what maybe the plant managers were thinking that day and the rationale behind what was going on. And then they dig deeper and be like, well, what are all the real causes for why this big explosion and fire happened? I find it fascinating. A lot of other people in the YouTube comments tend to find it fascinating, even though they are not, like I said, chemists or safety professionals themselves. And I think that people will be drawn into it. Now, I'm also going to stop and talk about some of the chemistry a lot of the time or even the lab safety analysis, because it's my job and it's my passion. So I'm going to, lend a bit of extra talking points about that because that's who I am. And I hope that you can enjoy that part along with me and maybe also enjoy, the video itself. So, I'm going to dive into reaction slop and hope that you all want to come along with the ride with me. I wonder if that one incident involving the 3 guys getting turned into paste on the walls and ceiling will get covered at some point. They haven't, I don't know how old that is, but they haven't done it yet. They probably won't do it now. They're on 2020 type stuff right about now. So, without further ado, we have the video, Fire from the Storm, Chemical Release at Biolab. I mean, the thumbnail is a big cloud over a power plant, so I'm guessing it's well, not a power plant, but over a plant. I'm guessing that there is a big fire from some kind of storm even. So, yeah, let's start. And that's how you know this is American.
August 27th, 2020. The Biolab Lake Charles Chemical Facility in Westlake, Louisiana.
Also, the narrator for this is phenomenal. So they got the perfectly voiced person to actually talk about these.
Extreme wind from Hurricane Laura ripped through the facility, severely damaging buildings.
That kind of storm.
Rainwater seeped into the compromised buildings and contacted products stored inside, causing chemicals to react, decompose, and a fire to ignite.
You never want to see a colored cloud.
A large plume of hazardous gases, including toxic chlorine, traveled from the facility over the neighboring community, requiring many people living nearby to shelter in place and a major highway to be closed.
The fire and release at Biolab.
God, that's why there's exactly why you don't want to be stuck living in one of these industrial zones. I mean, I don't have to tell you that, but I would shit bricks seeing that coming over the horizon from if I were wherever I was living. Taco Bell's too strong. Yeah, it comes out red like that. But God, the scale at which this stuff is done it's really mind-boggling sometimes that this is what it can really erupt into.
Is not the only significant chemical incident in recent years to be caused by extreme weather. Companies and regulators must take steps to ensure that chemical facilities are protected against damage from natural hazards, as extreme weather is becoming more common.
I wonder why weather is becoming more common. Also interesting, this just so happens to be one where I'm guessing that this might happen to be one of the few videos where the gigantic accident is not born of just almost malicious negligence. It's actually just born of, natural disasters. It's happened only a couple times
before. The Biolab Lake Charles facility manufactures and supplies water care products for pools and spas. One of the materials produced at the facility is a formulation comprised primarily of the chemical TCCA. In large bodies of water, like swimming pools, TCCA-based formulations dissolve and break down slowly, releasing available chlorine into the water to sanitize contaminants, such as algae and bacteria. But when a TCCA-based formulation instead contacts a small amount of water and does not dissolve, it can undergo a chemical reaction that generates heat and causes the material to decompose and produce toxic chlorine gas.
All right, so on the chemistry stop for a second, I don't know if this small window is honestly enough for the drawing. I kind of tested it before and it should hopefully be okay. But TCCA is actually kind of interesting to me, especially because I actually used to work with this compound in undergrad. So if I quickly draw the structure here, and I'll even draw a full structure here with all atoms being shown instead of like the shortcut nomenclature that chemists often use. But yeah, I actually used to work with this chemical. I mean, you know, anybody who's treating the pH and such of their pool and their chlorine levels would have. But in a research setting, I use this actually as an oxidizer, as it's a very good source of like, you know, solid chlorine to do some oxidated stuff. It's really good at actually like taking, what was I doing again? I was basically using it to go from an alcohol where the OH group on the end of some kind of carbon group being the R. R just represents a generic large carbon group. OH is the actual alcohol group. And it's pretty good at, you know, going from TCCA. I have to actually write this out fairly large. TCCA is quite good at taking that and turning it into a ketone, one of these carbon-oxygen double bonds. It is, you know, it's also very cheap, which is a great, you know, greatly beneficial when you're doing research or really anything. Abundant, and it doesn't suffer from a lot of the same issues that like regular Clorox bleach can sometimes. I should know because my entire project was trying to do this with household bleach, sodium hypochlorite for a while. NaOCl. There you go. I was trying to do my project with sodium hypochlorite solution for a while, and good God, did that ever just not work. I had just some of the worst, just dumpster results possible. And after so many months of trying to just do micro adjustments to save things and like kind of get more of the main product I was getting, but less of the garbage, one suggestion from my professor, he finally chimed in with something, said like, well, how about you try this? Or actually, no, I think I can't remember if it was my professor chimed in or I found a paper and this TCCA magically solved all of my problems. So like, anyways, but that was actually kind of interesting. I wasn't expecting, let me catch up on things. Chlorinated hurricanes. We can now safely swim with the sharks. I mean, the chlorine will get the sharks. The chlorine will get you. If you could swim faster than the chlorine, then, you know, maybe it'll work out for you. Chlorinated Hurricane sounds like a sick 80s themed hard rock tribute band. It also sounds like a really sick, like, also like maybe 90s, 80s, like early punk themed band. Like if you're trying to emulate, like, I don't know. It doesn't quite have the same ring as Sex Pistols, but it's kind of in the same boat for me anyways. It gives me the same imagery of like how they like to use like that like magazine pastiche where they just took a bunch of different letters and like pasted it together to like, you know, form their band name. I think the same thing would apply here for TCCA or for Chlorinated Hurricanes. But yeah, it's because it's interesting. You said I should probably also just put some music on when we talk about this as well. Go back to the playlist. I find it interesting that they're talking about how it's like reacting with a small amount of water, because I wouldn't use a small amount of water to generate chlorine gas, though I guess, I mean, it's possible given what they said. Oh, I never finished the structure. Oops. Anyways, UCCA. Because what I had usually ended up doing was that if I did TCCA plus hydrochloric acid, that typically has the two chlorine groups react, and that actually produces chlorine gas as well. So that's what I typically see in a lot of like amateur synthesis type videos, and have also seen in you know, literature. So it's actually it's interesting. You have a small amount of water kind of do that. I guess having it's so concentrated, the chlorines will actually start interacting with each other between different molecules of TCCA and create the chlorine gas cloud. Anyways, I've yammered on long enough about this. Let's get back to the video.
On August 24th, 2020, the National Hurricane Center forecasted that Tropical Storm Laura would become a hurricane the next day. Laura was expected to approach the U.S. coast near major hurricane strength, with strong winds and heavy rainfall. That day, Biolab began shutting down its Lake Charles operations in preparation for the hurricane.
Oh, they actually did the responsible thing, huh?
Successfully transported about 825,000 pounds of product from the site. But some trucks scheduled to remove additional material never arrived at the facility, meaning over 1 million pounds of the TCCA-based formulation
And then
was left
trucks,
on
huh?
site. The
Interesting.
remaining product was placed on triple-stacked pallets to protect it from potential floodwater.
I guess that's better than
On the
nothing,
morning of
but
August 26th,
it's not very high.
Biolab's management
Like less than half
announced
a
its
foot.
decision to evacuate the facility. All employees left the site. At 1 a.m. on August 27th, Hurricane
Oh man, this is gonna be one of those deathless videos, isn't it, huh? It's less exciting that way, but I suppose that's for the best.
Laura made landfall
First music video is in an
southwest
empty pool.
Louisiana as a Category
Nice.
4 hurricane, with maximum sustained
True.
winds reaching 150 miles per hour. The storm dumped huge amounts of rain, with some areas of southwestern Louisiana getting as much as 12 inches. Strong hurricane winds ripped off portions of the roof that covered Biolab's Plant 4 production building, which housed an estimated 70,000 to 100,000 pounds of TCCA-based formulation. Because of damage to Plant 4's roof, rainwater contacted the product stored inside. By 8:30 a.m.,
didn't account
the
for that part
material
of
began
the
to
equation.
react. It generated heat and decomposed, releasing toxic chlorine gas. Heat from the reaction and decomposition caused a fire to erupt in the building. A massive toxic gas and smoke plume traveled over the local community toward Interstate 10. Emergency responders closed Interstate 10 near the facility and requested a shelter-in-place order be issued for nearby residents. The fire
I might have only half listened to the weather report that was going out, but like, huh. So I think this is even before the hurricane itself even hit. That's interesting, because that's just the rainfall itself. Because everybody else probably would have evacuated if it was full on hurricane, and it would have said, hands up, it's Jover, guys. Like, let's just get out of here. But, we haven't even had the actual hurricane touchdown. Interesting. Deathless chemical disaster run. I wonder how many resets it took to get a run that good. It only happens one in a few million. It's a perfect start. Very rare glitch. It's RNG dependent, honestly. But, in the tasks, of course, people can mess around and, ensure that, like, you press start on the exact correct frame of, chemical disaster. But, in a real-time attack run like this, it's not really that possible. It's beyond human precision.
fire grew quickly, ultimately destroying the Plant 4 process building and its equipment. Later in the afternoon, around 5:30
Later,
p.m.,
it got worse.
white chemical clouds were seen emerging from another building at the facility. The building, a warehouse that contained over 1 million pounds of the TCCA-based formulation, had also sustained severe damage to portions of its roof. Emergency responders worked to reduce
I guess
and
the hurricane
control
did
the
rip through,
chemical
huh?
release.
Oh, no, it's
At
probably
2:30
after the...
p.m.
Yeah, that
the
makes sense.
following
After the
day,
hurricane.
Events at the Biolab facility were deemed sufficiently controlled. After being closed for 28 hours, Interstate 10 was reopened and the shelter-in-place order was lifted. Thankfully, no injuries were reported as a result of the incidents.
Damn.
The
Video
Chemical
where
Safety
no one was
Board
hurt.
launched an investigation into the fire and release at Biolab and found that 5 safety issues contributed to the incident. They are
Oh, well, I'm going to try to predict some of the other safety issues from watching this just because that's who I am, but we already got one: extreme weather preparation. TAS allows for an exploit that allows individuals to carry 10 times the normal amount of TCCA containers to speed up relocation. You don't need so many trucks. It would have prevented everything. So let's see. I mean, wow. Usually these are a lot easier to pin, but without seeing a manager be like, they decided to not sign off on the safety, the standard operating procedure for this task, but they've been doing it for 40 years. Like, that's like an obvious red flag. This one's actually a lot more difficult to actually think about. I mean, I guess, so let's see, extreme weather preparation, that could be so broad. I mean, that could be not having a sealed leak-proof roof. That could be storing your bags of TCCA higher off the ground. That could be not storing them so densely as to react so badly. Could be ordering trucks further in advance. God, I mean, good God, no one died. It's so hard to actually think about what could have went wrong. Yeah, I'm just gonna keep going with it then. This building seems like it was exposed to the outside elements pretty heavily. I mean, all buildings are to an extent, right? I mean, there probably could have been thicker walls, right, to, you know, prevent panels being torn away and rent asunder like that. Could have been a big concrete kind of structure. I don't know if that would quite help. I'm not an expert on concrete, but it could help to be less flimsy building. You could have underground storage. That would probably make more sense, right? If your building is operating out of Louisiana, an underground storage facility would probably help a lot with this kind of thing. You could definitely predict like extreme weather events like this occurring with, you know, a fair amount of frequency. That would help. Does look like sheet metal buildings. Yeah, I guess it is just kind of a, you know, it's the manufacturing equivalent of the shit house. So yeah, they probably could have done that a little better.
Extreme weather preparation, process hazard analyses implementation, emergency preparedness and response, adherence to applicable hazardous materials code, and regulatory coverage of reactive chemical hazards.
All right, I think I got 0 for 5 there. But yeah, no, that makes sense. Like, I mean, process hazard analysis. I'm going to guess maybe they're burying the lead a little bit here, and I'm guessing that maybe they just weren't prepared at all for one of these plans. And this is where the negligence comes in of, oh, we live in a hurricane area, but we don't have like a hurricane evacuation plan. Like, we just called in a bunch of trucks like a week earlier, and oops, like 80% of them showed up. Etobler. Emergency preparedness, kind of a similar thing. I wonder what hazardous materials code they violated here. Huh. Underground storage would be a better alternative. Look at Chicken Man Gus Meth Lab for a good example. Yeah, there you go. If it's good enough for meth, it's good enough for pool chlorine chemistry. Are there even sensors to detect when this enters the air, like a carbon monoxide detector, but for wet pool chemicals? I mean, yeah, there are commercial chlorine detectors do exist. There's a couple at the university which I work at. And I mean, it's definitely better for like low detections of chlorine in the air, right? Because at high detections of chlorine, you can for low concentrations of chlorine in the air, the sensors are good for, because at high concentrations, you can, well, see it. And 2, even if you can't see it quite yet, because it would be like a big green cloud, it would probably be corroding the living hell out of everything it's coming in contact with. So, and also smell absolutely abhorrent. So, you know, it would be possible to have those detectors up. I'm not sure how it would really help necessarily in this situation, because at that point, once the chlorine hits the air, the disaster is kind of already beginning because the TCCA is going up in flames. But yeah, I mean, these things definitely do exist. Stop pissing on the TCCA, Walter. You're creating toxic fumes, Walter. I am the one who pisses.
The first safety issue is extreme weather preparation.
Oh shit, real life footage.
In May 2018, the CSB released its final report on the 2017 incident at the Arkema chemical plant in Crosby, Texas.
Hey, this also so happens to be a video, something they made a video on, and was probably the only time until this video I have seen the narrative be the company did not actually do anything negligent. They did like literally everything they could without endangering the shit out of their workers, and like the place just flooded and shit sucked.
At Arkema, flooding from Category 4 Hurricane Harvey disabled the facility's refrigeration system. As a result, chemicals that required refrigeration decomposed and burned, releasing fumes and smoke into the air.
Those are much crazier chemicals in those trucks.
The Arkema report recommended that the Center for Chemical Process Safety, or CCPS, develop broad and comprehensive guidance to help companies assess their U.S. facility risk from all types of potential extreme weather events. In response to this recommendation, in 2019, CCPS updated its publication, CCPS Monograph, Assessment of and Planning for Natural Hazards. The monograph presents steps for preparing for a natural disaster, including how to evaluate wind hazards and how to identify potentially vulnerable equipment. But the CSB found that Biolab
here's the
did not
negligence.
adequately implement the updated CCPS guidance at its Lake Charles facility.
Had Biolab...
So it's what sucks every time when you watch these CSB videos is that they're a government agency that doesn't really have teeth. They are kind of like me in my job, where I can identify problems and make a bunch of recommendations. They're recommending things to people like OSHA, the EPA, and other just like boards that are willing to listen. But these are bodies that don't typically have a lot of weight to throw and ease to like regulate new things unless it's like 400 people died because of this. So like we just saw there, they were actually able to, like, you know, they made a publication in 2017. In 2019, this other board kind of came out with new best practices, but that's the thing. It's best practice. It's not a regulation. This biolab place did not have to follow the new standards in 2019, and they didn't. And, you know, for whatever reason, either they didn't get the memo, which would be kind of crazy being a giant industry looking out for things like this. They didn't have the money. Yeah, right. They didn't have the time. Also, yeah, right. You know, and shit like this then just happens. And even if no one got hurt, I'm sure the birds in the area did not appreciate a giant cloud of chlorine. I guess flooding kind of fucks over the whole underground storage idea, huh? It sort of does, but like, you know, if you really were like going into this with the idea that we're going to evacuate after we store the remainder of this stuff out here, like, you could probably like make a pretty tight underground bunker. If they can make underground bunkers to protect you from Judgment Day and the apocalypse, the nuclear apocalypse, they can probably make one that's waterproof. But they just decided not to, you know. Crash out here teaching me more about chemistry than my 11th grade chem teacher ever did. That's what I'm here for. You were taught you just don't remember anything. I mean, it's fair. I mean, you know, not every profession requires it. My profession explicitly requires it, and my passion requires it too. So I love talking about this stuff. I never had any formal pedagogy training, but I do like, you know, doing my best to actually teach my passion. And I had to, you know, practice that a little bit when I was out and, you know, doing teaching stuff back in graduate school. Okay, so resetting the microphone again.
effectively followed that guidance, it would have identified that the buildings used to house the TCCA base formulation were not built to current wind design code requirements. This knowledge could have led Biolab to take more proactive actions to protect its chemicals during a hurricane, thereby preventing the incident.
Yep, like you all were saying, it's kind of a shitty metal plate building. They probably could have had a much better emergency storage location.
And the CSB found that additional measures are needed to ensure that
she looks so done.
Facilities are protected.
I mean, you know, maybe it was like about take 6, 7. I imagine they have other things to be doing rather than give, you know, the most enthusiastic and you know, voice acting professional kind of take for their commentary. But it is funny sometimes. Some of the CSB voice actors are like, or not voice actors, but like officials actually talking in these videos are like, just have a natural camera charisma. Other ones, not so much. They are behind the desk paper pushers like me. Von Zella Vincent is 100% a name Stan Lee made up for a C-list Marvel superhero. I will say Von Zella Vincent, I do like that name. It's good. It's like, what am I trying to say here? Like, it's got a good like cadence and ring to it. It's got alliteration. 2 words of the first and last name of like almost the same length is really good stuff. The Chemical Crusader.
The incident.
Shares the Flash
and the
origin
CSB
story.
found that additional measures are needed to ensure that aging Louisiana chemical facilities are protected from extreme weather.
Those aging Louisiana chemical facilities.
There are many more facilities in the state that store hazardous materials in buildings that were designed before current wind design code requirements were in effect.
Oh, that's weird. That looks like they're using drone footage for the first time. Like they're like it's so stable, but it's obviously panning like in rotation within the world. I don't think I've seen them use drone footage. It looks very weird.
Therefore, the CSB made a recommendation to the state of Louisiana to
Budget
require
increases,
the
yeah.
operators of certain chemical facilities at risk from extreme weather to evaluate the hazards to their facilities presented by hurricanes and accompanying wind, rainwater, floodwater, or storm surge forces, and implement processes and safeguards for protection against those hazards. Finally, the CSB believes the EPA should take further actions to help ensure that chemical facilities around the country consider risks presented by climate change.
The EPA should do something to make people, to make industries recognize climate change risks? Oh my god. If only they have been trying for so hard without those poor lobbyers that are going against this. How could this have ever been prevented?
And increased
Can't get shit in
extreme weather
Detroit.
events.
This is Louisiana. Can't have
These
shit in Baton
actions were
Rouge.
outlined as recommendations made to the EPA by the Government Accountability Office, or GAO. In its report, Chemical Accident Prevention, EPA should ensure regulated facilities consider risk from climate change.
Straight
For
to the point
example,
naming.
the GAO calls on the EPA to produce guidance that requires covered facilities to incorporate hazards from climate change into their risk management plans, assess the risk of climate change during inspections, and increase inspection of facilities located within vulnerable communities.
Wow.
The EPA has yet to act on the majority of the GAO's report. Therefore, the CSB made a recommendation to the EPA to implement the remaining recommendations made
You're saying they had no chemical accident prevention, aka no cap. All right, get out.
to the EPA in the Government Accountability Office's report. The second
Or honestly, if you can be humorous about this too, then like maybe you should go work for them. They seem to be in touch with internet culture. Maybe they need some help touching the Gen Alpha, you know.
safety issue identified at BioLab is process hazard analyses implementation. The CSB learned that TCCA is not covered by the OSHA Process Safety Management, or PSM, regulation. However, the BioLab Lake Charles facility voluntarily adopted some aspects of PSM.
Oh, well, that's
For
good
instance,
at least.
the company performed limited process hazard analyses, or PHAs, in 2010 and in 2016, before the incident. During the 2010 PHA, the potential hazard of warehouse product decomposition was identified, with a potential cause of warehouse roof failure due to natural disasters such as hurricanes or tornadoes.
Ah, yes. Predict once-in-a-lifetime disasters, even if they are happening every year now, still seems like a huge risk factor in and of itself. It was sheet metal. So I'm not quite getting what you're saying there. Like, I mean, obviously they can't predict it, but they can very much expect the fact that like they're living by the Gulf of Mexico. El Nino is going to kick up a tornado every once in a while, plus climate change, plus L plus ratio. It's yeah, they definitely should have been like, yeah, don't make the building out of sheet metal. Well, it's actually nice to see the company did at least something to be like, hey, so this isn't regulated because of like pool chemical. This is like a pool chemical, but we have like tons of the shit. It's going to like cause fire and roof failure in event of a hurricane. So I guess good that they predicted that. That's good. A disaster so bad they can predict the extreme levels beforehand. I mean, to a certain extent, yeah, you can predict how bad, like, you know, especially wind-based disasters like hurricanes and tornadoes are going to be. I mean, we all in the States here know, like, Tornado Alley is like that southern Midwest area, and not only do they get tornadoes more frequently, but they also routinely get tornadoes that go to like category 4, 5, and I think 5 and up, well, like far above the limits for 5 as well. And not other states in the union don't really get it that much, or get tornadoes of that severe disaster that often. And so, you know, it's kind of like how when we had the Fukushima plant disaster with the big tsunami, you know, that kind of made a nuclear oopsie. It's like they were able to like there were engineers that were basically saying like, hey, the concrete walls levees that we have here meant to stop a tsunami should be taller here because they can go high. We have recorded numbers as high as like this many feet, or meters because it's Japan. That have come through this area before. We need to actually get this high, but the regulations didn't say that. The engineers said that, and so when it came time for construction, guess what? They didn't do that. They just kind of built to the regulation, and that's why the levees were ineffective at actually preventing the tsunami from causing havoc in Fukushima. It probably wouldn't have prevented everything bad from going wrong there, but it would have made things significantly less worse and made a whole hell of a lot less contaminated ocean water. So in the same measure here, they're in Louisiana. They can definitely predict the fact that like, hey, hurricanes are going to come by and they're going to be more intense than say like one in Rhode Island or something like that. If Rhode Island were to even get a hurricane. So they could definitely prepare based on previous historical data at the very least. Now, I mean, could they prepare for like a completely never before seen strength hurricane? No, but they could at least prove things a little bit better.
The PHA team
That's my take on it
recommended that
anyways.
the site consider evaluating warehouse roof structure for hurricane conditions and verify warehouse is built to withstand high winds. But the CSB found there was no documentation that such an evaluation ever took place.
Had BioLab implemented its 2010 PHA recommendation, it could have identified that the facility buildings were susceptible to damage from hurricane-strength winds. This may have led to BioLab implementing controls to prevent the TCCA base formulation from being exposed to hurricane rainwater.
And the CSB determined that the lack of documentation regarding the 2010 PHA recommendation points to deficiencies in BioLab's PHA action item management system.
Companies should ensure that PHA recommendations are assigned to appropriate personnel with a deadline for initial evaluation. The rationale for recommendation modification or rejection must be documented, and the status of all action items or recommendations should be tracked until completion.
Yeah, no, Jimson, that's absolutely correct. That's what it is. They're like, they told her to be like, they told her to put her white voice on probably, and she's like, I'm getting so sick of this shit.
Such a process ensures that findings and recommendations from PHAs are effectively acted upon and appropriately managed.
The third safety issue found at BioLab Lake Charles is emergency preparedness and response. The CSB found that BioLab relied on hose stations, fire hydrants, and monitors in the event of an emergency.
So they were hoping that more water would put the problem out. I guess that sort of is what TCCA is meant for, being dunked in a lot of water, but that would also just spread a strong chlorinating agent everywhere. Maybe get like dry chemical extinguishing emergency response systems.
And its fire protection system used 4 sequentially operated pumps to supply water from a reservoir to fire suppression equipment. At the time of the incident, one of those pumps was not functional. One was powered by diesel and 2 ran on electricity.
So that makes for a total of 1/4 of their pumps would work at all during a given emergency like this, because, or like a natural disaster like this, because the hurricane's taking out power, the other one's not working, so that's 2 down and then 1 down respectively. So all they have is the diesel powered one, but I'm guessing that for some reason that's not actually been filled, or it's just gone in disrepair, or someone would have to be, I don't know, manually opening the valve for the diesel, and no one would be during an emergency. I love industrial planning. There's no flaws in anything whatsoever.
Lab relied on a backup generator to power those two electric pumps in the event of a power
the backup
outage.
generator. But let me
But
guess.
the CSB learned that BioLab's backup generator was not working before the hurricane. Therefore, the company rented a generator in preparation for Hurricane Laura.
Rented a
With
generator.
electricity knocked out at BioLab and the surrounding area, the company needed to use this rental backup generator to operate the electric fire water pumps on the day of the incident. But the CSB found that BioLab personnel struggled to activate the rental generator or transfer power from it, and did not.
It's almost like if you buy a generator for a factory on a rental, right when you need it, nobody's going to know how to operate such a complex piece of machinery, and it's going to be useless. It's almost like you should maybe do preventative maintenance on your generators and make sure that they are always working in case of a emergency like this. So that way you're not fucking playing with your dick when the emergency happens. You've heard that 1 in 4 guys have a non-functioning pump. Kind of crazy how this ended up being the opposite. True. Well, yeah, and they have zero functioning pumps. Fucked up. They just kick in. True. You just needed 4 people with a couple, of a very small arsenal on their backs, heading in, pouring diesel into the generator manually in very small, conveniently scattered gas cans, and then one of them to sacrifice themselves for the greater good at the end. And you make a movie out of them. They're a hero. Congratulations, you have the next weird Americana blockbuster that is strangely proud of throwing yourself and your life on the line for the company. That one overhead graphic of the building looks like one of those incomplete buildings in a Lego game you have to build up to unlock a mini kit. It does. It reminds me kind of either that or in the same Lego game where it's you have I think there was at least one of the Lego Star Wars games where it was throwing some of the bounty hunter destroyable bomb, or there were those those silver metal pieces or whatever that if you threw the bounty hunter bomb at it, it would blow it up. But then there was another version where blew up parts of it, in not procedurally, but it degenerated the geometry and only got pieces of it gone, and it looks like that. Yeah, the thermal detonators.
Struggled to activate the rental generator or transfer power from it, and did not have a manual or operating procedure to help them troubleshoot the issues, so the company could not run the electric pumps. As a result, only one fire pump, a diesel pump, was available for BioLab's response.
Did it work?
Therefore, the water pressure to the fire protection system was too low to suppress the
I guess it was
decomposing
working,
material.
but not well.
The decomposition and fire could not be controlled until a third-party emergency response contractor arrived with equipment capable of effectively responding to the incident. This was over 5 hours from when BioLab first contacted 911.
Companies must ensure that
Feels remarkably fast for a team that can just hose down the entire area to actually be able to respond, but it's good on them at least.
emergency response equipment is fully operational and can function when needed during emergencies. Companies should adequately maintain the equipment and repair or replace equipment in a timely manner. Companies must also ensure employees are trained on how to use the emergency equipment.
Use emergency equipment, test
The
it,
fourth stage
run drills, make sure people do it. Don't buy new equipment and then be like, I can't believe no one knows how to use the new equipment.
safety issue that CSB highlights in its report is adherence to applicable hazardous materials codes.
Palpatine.
The CSB found that because BioLab Lake Charles was storing and handling large quantities of a TCCA-based formulation, it should have implemented extra precautions as required by applicable hazardous materials codes.
Oh, wait, we're getting into requirements, not just recommendations or best practices. There are requirements that they violated. Oh my God. Let's see if they get slapped with a $10,000 fine for causing millions in damage.
In this case, the applicable codes are set by the National Fire Protection Association and are known as NFPA 101 and NFPA 400. NFPA 101 requires an automatic sprinkler or other protection designed to minimize danger to occupants before they have time to evacuate from high-hazard occupancies. NFPA 400 specifies sprinkler systems, among other requirements, for buildings storing hazardous materials.
So the NFPA books do have a little bit to do, like, with my job. Occasionally I have to interface and leaf through the pages. Oh my god, the NFPA is such a huge fucking set of documents. It is such a huge set of documents and so boring to thumb through. I'm glad that I'm not, like, the only person on my team that, like, has some responsibility for looking at this. I think, frankly, even I might be the person least responsible on my team for having to look through this. I have to occasionally do it, but, like, it is so dull and so boring and so technical and so willing to, like, point to other chapters of itself. Or it's just like, am I reading one chapter on, like, hydrogen gas safety, or am I reading like 50 that have to do with like hydrogen gas in tube furnaces, hydrogen gas in industrial settings, and how to store flammable gases? And it gets ridiculous. So, I mean, I'm sure there's someone, you know, at the plant who's like specifically hired to make sure shit is up to code to the NFPA, but like thinking about NFPA and IFC really hits, IFC being the International Fire Code, kind of a competing association, regulatory body. Yeah, it gets, it brings some feelings hearing these two words and when you actually work within like the safety world. Yeah, if you had to read them, your brain would start decomposing like TCCA. You'd start seeing fumes pour out of your ears, green fumes, and the toxicity and corrosivity would drive everybody away from you.
But the CSB found that BioLab lacked those extra precautions.
Had the BioLab facility met the two NFPA code requirements, it likely would have begun applying large amounts of water to the decomposing chemical much earlier. This earlier response could have reduced the amount of material that decomposed, reduced the amount of chlorine released, and reduce the extent of the facility damage.
My question, and it's interesting they're not talking about it, is if they had only one of the sprinklers working, I feel like that, I mean, I guess they did go over the fact that diluting the TCCA would make the problem less awful because it's meant to be dissolved in a bunch of water. But for me, it seems like, I wonder if it's like the rain, because like the rain could be, maybe I could draw this better than I can describe it. So like, say that we have like a, you know, an XY axis, and I guess it's time for music because I'm talking again. We just have like something like this, and it's like amount of let's see, let's plot amount of rain against disaster. So amount of rain versus extent of disaster. Extent of bad. I imagine that, you know, the graph might look something like, maybe something like this, and would probably fall off kind of like this. I imagine that maybe like the rain seeping through the building when this fire kind of started, I feel like it would probably start maybe around here. And what if only like one sprinkler starts working and brings us to like the peak of how bad this shit could get with just only one of them working? Like I could totally see like four sprinklers like actually getting us all the way to the other side and like not causing a problem anymore. But with one sprinkler, I have my doubts, and I'm like, this is probably just making it worse, isn't it? And I'm surprised that they haven't done an analysis of that. Maybe my assumptions are wrong, but like, still, it feels like that would be something to consider. They needed Eggman's super laser piss. They absolutely did. That's who they should have phoned instead of the cleanup crew. Or maybe that is who they phoned after 911, or who 911 contacted to get things in. Maybe they got Eggman to shoot the arc beam right down at this plant. There was some collateral damage. That's why the buildings are even more, falling apart than they were in the storm. But yeah, it's a distinct possibility that was covered up because we can't have Eggman doing a good deed, or see that Louisiana has written a check for $300,000 to Eggman. What would Sonic think? Sonic is loves Louisiana. He couldn't stand for that. And Shadow did his best with the laser. Yeah, I mean he got things rolling, but I guess he died. He died in the marching accident that followed it. It's quite a shame. All right, let's finish this video out.
And finally, the fifth safety issue identified by the CSB is regulatory coverage of reactive chemical hazards. TCCA-based formulations are
So this is where we start blaming OSHA for saying, why did you not regulate this harder? Why did you not make them have real regulations to follow instead of all this NFPA bullshit?
Reactive chemicals that have the potential to decompose and release toxic chlorine gas. But TCCA is not listed for coverage under OSHA's PSM standard or the EPA's Risk Management Program rule. Therefore, BioLab was not required to implement baseline process safety management system elements under these specific regulations. The CSB has long been concerned about the regulatory gap in coverage of reactive chemicals, which has led to many serious incidents over the past 3 decades. Those incidents caused deaths, injuries, and significant property damage.
The CSB continues to investigate incidents that could have been prevented with more robust regulatory coverage of reactive chemicals. Both the OSHA PSM and EPA RMP regulations should be amended to close the regulatory gap identified by the CSB.
It's so hard to do that. It is ludicrously hard. It is absurdly hard to get new regulations out of OSHA. The lobbying is insane against OSHA, as I'm sure all of you in my audience could expect. The lobbying is just ridiculous. It is so hard for OSHA to pass anything that the lobbying bodies immediately don't say actually that could hurt my production by 1% and I will lose $100 this year. And it just works. It stops things. OSHA hasn't been able to update update exposure limits, what would be a hazardous limit to be exposed to over a now I'm testing my job knowledge. What's the time period for that? I think it's 15 minute. No, OSHA has 8-hour and 1-hour exposure limits. I know they have the 8-hour. I think it's 1 hour is the other one. They haven't been able to update that since the 70s. They tried updating it in the 90s, but guess what? That also got defeated too. And so a lot of regulation has kind of had to come out of other spots or very specific one-off type things. It's very frustrating to see. That's why the EPA had to be the ones to recently regulate dichloromethane. If you haven't maybe you didn't hear of this, but there was this chemical called dichloromethane. Looks like this. 2 chlorines off to the side, 2 hydrogens coming off of a carbon, abbreviated as DCM pretty often, is a common paint stripping chemical, and it has caused a lot of cancer and deaths, cancer-related deaths in industrial paint stripping type fields or industrially large uses of it, because it also functions as a good solvent for a lot of other organic molecules. And it was only I guess technically this year the regulation goes into effect. Last year it was passed, and I mean, yeah, it's been linked to 80 or so deaths in the last couple decades. So It's a shame it took this long. Although the other hand of that is that like now the EPA has regulated it, it's also kind of caused a shitstorm within academic universities because they didn't make good carve-outs for academia that uses very small amounts of it, or relatively small amounts of it, in like fume hoods that locally exhaust the stuff. So like it makes my job a pain in the ass. But I guess I'm glad that it's been regulated more than anything else. Safety regulations are written in blood. They sure are. Written in blood, often of union people. It's a sad fucking state that this country can be in sometimes. Anyways.
Made to
Yay
OSHA
video.
to amend the Process Safety Management Standard to achieve more comprehensive control of reactive hazards that could have catastrophic consequences. And the CSB also reiterated a recommendation to the EPA to revise the accidental release prevention requirements to explicitly cover catastrophic.
Ain't that how it is? You keep telling them and they don't listen for various reasons.
The public
could save people's lives,
but
but
could have
fuck
been
it.
prevented. Companies must be prepared for the hazards extreme weather can present at their facilities, and regulatory bodies should do more to address reactive chemical risks. These steps will help ensure that similar incidents never occur. Thank you for watching this CSB
fuck around,
safety
find out
video.
clause. It's technically what the scientific method is,
more
but
information,
you know,
please
these
visit
people fuck around. They
csb.gov.
stick around in the fuck around and find out rather than the, you know, prevent more fucking around category. Huh. Well, that was interesting. At least I hope you found that interesting. It wasn't my favorite USCSB video, but it was at least interesting to see another like natural disaster related event. Usually they don't tend to cover these, mostly because I don't know, they aren't notable. They don't happen that much. They don't have as many deaths behind them, so it's maybe not as like, you know, it doesn't hold as much public weight kind of thing. But, you know, I think this was a pretty good coverage, honestly, and it made me think about a chemical that I have personal connections to in a slightly different way. It's interesting like that. I mean, we have some more time. I would love to probably show like maybe my favorite video from them. It's much older, but like it's well, it has a giant explosion in it, and it's from such a mundane thing that like actually makes it really interesting, in my opinion. You think your favorite chemistry adjacent YouTube channel is still probably Kyle Hill? Yeah, Kyle Hill's pretty good. I don't watch all of his stuff. I'm mostly interested in his Half-Life histories kind of thing. Because, you know, nuclear accidents are just as cool. But, you know, he makes other good stuff. He's got a decent sense of humor. I also like the fact that he's really working hard to try to reclaim the image of nuclear power. I think I even used to be kind of an anti-nuclear power type because I really bought into like, you know, the scare of like how I mean nuclear waste can be some serious shit if it goes wrong, but like for the most part it's like pretty easy to manage, all things considered. It helps that it's a waste in solid form unlike carbon dioxide that goes everywhere because it's a gas. And yeah, there's been like only one like serious nuclear disaster in history, Chernobyl. Everything else is like 3 Mile Island still can't be linked to cancer. Fukushima, like they evacuated the area and that might have some problems too, but it's general, and it also generally could have just been prevented if, I don't know, they built a giant levee that the engineers recommended to do rather than just what the the regulations specified. It's messed up. Wasn't Chernobyl also due to negligence? It was due to a lot of things. I mean, I recently watched like some history buff type videos about like, you know, the Chernobyl miniseries, and like, yeah, it wasn't, you know, quite super accurate, but to history, but you know, enough information being like, yeah, there's negligence, there's keeping state secrets about how the reactors work, there is wanting to kind of adhere to a authority structure rather than the stop, my science is telling me to not do this kind of structure. Yeah, Chernobyl was a combination of so many fuck ups. It's really hard to even it's hard to like count them all and like put it all in order without being like, this is, I mean, you can make a mini series out of it. Crazy, right? Anyways, though, this one is this video is my favorite one from them, and this one's, it's 15 years old. You're going to see the drop in polygons, but like I still find this one to be maybe the most entertaining. But they still had, like, for the time, really good animation quality. I can't remember if people also thought that the Montauk disaster was somehow related to botched nuclear experiments. Or Montauk Monster. I'll take a risk. I'll look that up. Montauk Monster. An animal carcass that washed ashore. Beach Business District of New York in 2008. Eventually decided to be a water-degraded raccoon. Yeah, I'd have to take a look into this, but I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, it's also kind of a messed up thing that because, like, well, nuclear plants need water cooling. A lot of them were built on the sea, border with the sea. That's not a great idea, but I guess what can you do? All right, so yeah, this one's one of my favorites. It's about, well, a dust explosion at a sugar factory. This was probably my favorite because it's just chemically, it's just sugar. It's table sugar that caused a massive explosion. And the fact that it can be just sugar to cause this much of a problem is absolutely fascinating to me. And then it gets compounded with the fact that like there is some astounding plant negligence that went on to actually cause sugar, or that's like what am I trying to say here? Like tip the scales to make sugar an explosive compound. You have to kind of watch it to believe it. Ah, 240p video.
On February 7th, 2008, a series of violent sugar dust explosions devastated the Imperial Sugar Refinery in Port Wentworth, Georgia, just outside Savannah. Explosions raced through the buildings, fueled by accumulations of combustible sugar dust and sugar that had spilled from equipment. Thick concrete floors heaved up, and brick walls were blown into stairwells and work areas, blocking many exit routes. Fires spread rapidly. 8 workers died at the scene. 6 more died later at a regional burn center. Dozens of others were injured. The plant's massive sugar-packing buildings were a total loss.
Yeah, this one has deaths too, so you know it's interesting. It's more gripping. It's more true crime.
The accident at Imperial Sugar was the deadliest industrial dust explosion in the United States in decades. It highlights the extremely serious nature of combustible dust hazards.
There were significant accumulations of sugar dust and spilled granulated sugar on surfaces throughout this facility. Conditions were set for a catastrophic accident.
Imperial Sugar's sprawling Port Wentworth complex began operations in 1917.
Basic blender polygons. Anyways.
And grew to become one of the largest sugar refining and packaging facilities in the U.S. Granulated sugar from the refinery was stored in 3 100-foot-tall silos and then conveyed into packing buildings where it was packaged for distribution.
They didn't have the money for
Granulated
physics on sugar bags
converted into specialty products
at the time,
such as brown sugar and powdered sugar. Sugar was transported by a complex system of bucket elevators, screw conveyors, and conveyor belts. During this process, sugar spilled onto floors throughout the work area.
Yeah, that's actually what happened at the Death Star. Fucking Luke fires a torpedo, and it actually hits their sugar silos, and Vader just to be like, I don't know. I don't know why the sugar silo exploded. I mean, the Death Star exploded.
In places, the spilled sugar was many inches deep.
Many inches deep of spilled sugar. Keep that in mind.
This sugar also contained fine particles, which became airborne. In addition, hammer mills were used to crush the granulated sugar into powder.
Like, obviously this is a render, but like, for this incident to have happened, I have to imagine that like the amount of powder / aerosol sugar just like in the air has to be like accurate to like the density that they're going for in this video. There is an absurd amount of sugar in the air to the point where this is a respiratory hazard. You're breathing in fine solid particles. Like, that is basically how you contract mesothelioma with asbestos. Like, it's not good, even if sugar is non-toxic. It belongs in the stomach, not the lungs.
Sugar, creating even more dust. The machines were connected to a dust collection system, but it was undersized and in disrepair.
Why do we have so much dust in the plant? Whatever. Don't fix the dust collection unit. I'm sure it's fine. It's just sugar, guys. Nothing bad could happen.
And it was not connected to the bucket elevators and conveyors. Significant amounts of sugar dust escaped into the work areas. Workers routinely used compressed air to clean packaging machines, further dispersing sugar dust throughout the buildings.
Again, I love that. To clean the machines, they just sprayed compressed air on it. Great. To clear my desk of napkins and other rubble and pieces of plastic, I'm just going to use compressed air to blow it onto the ground. This solves the issue.
Over time, large amounts of dust accumulated on elevated, hard-to-clean surfaces, such as ducts, beams, and light fixtures.
It's
These surfaces were
everywhere.
not cleaned often enough to always keep the dust below hazardous levels. In the tunnel beneath the sugar silos, granulated sugar flowed through chutes onto a long steel conveyor belt. From time to time, clumps of sugar would become stuck in one of the chutes, blocking the flow of sugar on the belt, spilling sugar onto the floor and releasing dust into the tunnel.
No, all the
But the tunnel was large and ventilated, so this airborne dust did not build up to explosive concentrations.
That's great.
However, in 2007, the company enclosed the conveyor belt with stainless steel panels to protect the sugar from possible contamination. The enclosure was not equipped with a dust collection system. As a consequence, sugar dust would now be trapped inside this enclosure.
This is probably the biggest decision, like, from all the USCSB things that like just grind my gears. Like, you know that some middle manager made this decision because they were like, a customer had complained about there being like an earwig in one of their sugar bags. This is because we did not protect the sugar enough inside of the factory. I am going to put money aside for the construction of an enclosure around the conveyor belt that's in the open air to prevent this from happening, which will not solve the problem because that earwig probably got in there like some other point along the distribution. Doesn't like prevent things from getting in other places along the like sugar processing line. And 3, completely ignores the fact that like there's a reason this was open to the air in the first place. Doesn't go through their head for 1 second to say, why was this sugar open to the air? Why was the room designed like this? Must not have been important. Must have just been some dumbass who decided the plant and said it should be open, then they like contaminated sugar. I'm sure it'll be fine. Not an ounce of consideration was given to the idea that this might have been purposeful. Oh God, this kind of thing is like what I don't deal with this on a daily basis at my job and not nearly on as large of a scale. But there is just some times where it's just like I'm listening to someone propose an idea and I'm like, would you kindly remove your head from your ass for 1 second and think about why the people before you did this and not just assume that you can do whatever the hell you want because you have a grant? Maybe that's a dumb idea. Anyways, that's why I love this video so much, because it's just like, yep, just Horrifying negligence leads to an insane explosion. Single earwig responsible for 12 deaths. Exactly. And it's just like, this is why you don't complain. No, it's not why you don't complain, but it's why middle management can really suck sometimes.
On February 7th, 2008, clumps of sugar were found.
Also, I would like to point out, I'm pretty sure, so that was February 7th, 2008. This is when they're describing the accident. And they said back here,
Ventilated.
Let's see, when did this happen?
Airborne dust did not build up to explosive concentrations.
However,
whatever,
the housing. In 2007, it took 1 year for this to cause a problem. 1 year for this to cause the problem that the original designers knew that this would cause if the enclosure was built around the conveyor belt. It would have taken just a minimal amount of review to prevent this from happening, and yet it did anyways.
System. As a consequence, sugar dust would now be trapped inside this enclosure. On February 7th, 2008, clumps
2
of
months
sugar
at
were
minimum.
found blocking one of the discharge chutes. Sugar from the adjacent silo likely spilled off the moving belt.
Oh, also, the other complaint I have about, like, putting this thing up, too. Not only is there, like, the whole... Oh, at the end of 2007. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that. Yeah, 2 months it caught, like, the disaster happens. It fucking crazy. The other thing that, like, really made me think about that, like, how stunningly stupid this move was to make an enclosure around the conveyor belt is they knew, even if they, whoever probably made this decision to make the enclosure, like, didn't know about the exhaust problem. They knew that these chutes clogged regularly. If you build an enclosure around the conveyor belt and around the ends of the chutes, how the fuck are you going to unclog the chutes and clean up the mess? That's going to contaminate the sugar. You're going to get floor particles eventually in your sugar or something like that. Like, it's gross. And you can't clean it because it's a small enclosure. You're literally shooting yourself in your foot for the plan you want to get done, and you're shooting the foot of the guy who built this properly, or lady, or whoever who built this properly. It's ludicrous. It's so stupid.
Dust likely accumulated to an explosive concentration inside the enclosure.
And then,
at about 7:15 p.m., the sugar dust contacted a nearby ignition source, likely an overheated bearing, and exploded. This primary explosion blew apart the enclosure and vented into the packing building. Accumulated sugar was lofted and ignited by the advancing fireballs. The dust clouds fueled a chain reaction of secondary explosions, which swept through the buildings. Concrete floors buckled, releasing tons of granulated and powdered sugar into the flames. Emergency.
And it's just like, okay, I want to talk about something else here, like that, like we're paused on, but also it's like you can see, it's like if that was the extent of the negligence, this video probably would not have been made because the explosions would have stopped there. Because sugar is not an explosive compound, but because you have it so finely divided, it's able to interact with oxygen so quickly that that's why so much energy is getting released. Essentially, you're burning this extremely rapidly, and that causes an explosion. What is an explosion but not extremely rapid burning? And being finely divided is rapid burning. But because, as you might remember, there are inches of sugar powder everywhere in this plant, the entire place blows up because of one place blowing up. Again, a cascade of negligence just leads into an insane scale industrial accident for something so mundane. It blows my mind how you can get something so bad like this. And then also, I love this scene too, and because it shows that, like, even 15 years ago, they were still ahead of the curve, and the USCSB was still ahead of the curve in the animation department, because they're going to demonstrate, like, how disoriented someone trying to escape from the plant that might still be alive after all these explosions is. And they do such a great job at like giving that disoriented motion blur and like the head bobble that happens when like a human being is walking around in this disoriented panic. They did not have to try this hard, but for some reason they did, and that's why I love this channel.
Evacuation drills had not been conducted, and the explosions had cut the power to much of the interior lighting. In the maze of darkened and damaged stairwells and passageways, workers desperately tried to flee the growing inferno.
God. Imagine being on the highway and that fucking happens.
The CSB found that correspondence dating back to the late 1950s showed that plant managers in Port Wentworth were aware of the explosive nature of sugar dust and the danger of dust accumulations.
Since 1950, they knew. This happened in 2008. Good God.
As far back as 1961, a memo described a sugar dust explosion that heavily damaged the powdered sugar mill room.
Despite the long-standing awareness of the explosive nature of sugar dust, not enough was done to manage the hazard.
In 2006, the CSB issued a study of combustible dust, which called on OSHA to establish a comprehensive combustible dust standard based on the current standards of the National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA. In October 2007, OSHA began implementing a new national emphasis program to increase the enforcement of existing regulations related to combustible dust.
And it's not like it's just sugar. Combustible dust is like a known problem with so many things.
National emphasis program 4 months before the devastating explosion at Port Wentworth. But
management also gets a reminder 4 months before that, hey, combustible dust is a problem in all like industrial facilities. You all should manage this. And they said, yep. And they turned right back around and looked at this image and basically said, yeah, that looks fine.
Did not act effectively to control the serious.
It looks like fucking Scarface's manor in here, but it's fine.
Less than 2 months before the disaster, an internal inspection showed that many tons of sugar were still regularly spilling onto the floors. This provided much of the fuel for the massive secondary explosions and fires. The CSB found that over the years, the Port Wentworth facility periodically experienced small fires fueled by spilled sugar and accumulated dust on equipment.
Shit has happened previously here, and just no one cared.
That propagated through the plant. Investigators said that decades of operating without a catastrophic explosion may have lulled managers into complacency.
Also, it's been months since a catastrophic explosion. Surely it won't happen again in like the next year or two, right? It's been so many months. It'll never happen. It's the gambler's fallacy at work, you know? Management was like, it looks like it's snowing, so really, it's enrichment for the workers. Yeah, they get to, instead of going home to their families at Christmas, we get to keep them here in the sugar factory. What do you mean? There's snow in here. It's so holly and jolly. How could you not love it?
In its report, the CSB issued the following recommendations to the Imperial Sugar Company. Apply NFPA standards to the design and operation of the rebuilt Port Wentworth facility. Develop and implement comprehensive combustible dust control, housekeeping, and training programs. Improve emergency evacuation policies and procedures.
And lastly, just do common sense cleaning
within their own facilities by following the existing recommendations of the National Fire Protection Association. But it is also time for a comprehensive federal standard on combustible dust.
In April 2009, OSHA announced plans to begin rulemaking on a combustible dust standard for general industry.
That's good.
In its final report on the Imperial Sugar accident, the CSB recommended that OSHA move forward expeditiously with the new standard.
That's great.
Without regulation,
did they?
Enforcement, and education,
probably not. I didn't check up on it, but I'm guessing the answer is no.
Explosions.
For further information, please visit csb.gov.
So yeah, this is what I love about chemistry, and also what I hate about industry. That's why you're not going to catch me dead working in industry. Oh hey, look at that! So for some reason, YouTube's recommending me my own stream. Crazy how that works. Yeah, it's I love chemistry because I have the context to understand this at like a deep level, but it's also like I love it because you can really get just a rich appreciation for like how badly is management fucking up in these kinds of like investigations, and like how easy would it have been to just prevent this, like even with higher hazard stuff. Like remember when that train derailed out in East Palatine, Ohio? Like yeah, vinyl chloride's bad. You kind of need it for a lot of chemical processes, so like banning it's not an option. But like just make like the trains better. Like don't skimp out on the transit. Like it would have been like not a problem. Yet here we are. Hey D Prototype, glad you could make it for the tail end of this. I don't know how much you caught of me talking about this, but there was a massive sugar explosion in like this old video, and this is like why it's my favorite industrial disaster that this government agency's ever talked about. It's just astounding how management can be like, there is inches of powdered sugar everywhere. We've had historical explosions because of inches of explosions and fire because of inches of powdered sugar everywhere before. And we're also going to make it so this, but we're going to make it so this one spot that just happens to have a lot of powdered sugar kind of, accumulating. It just accumulates more powdered sugar because we don't want any of that nasty outside air touching our sugar and contaminating it. Even though we had 2 months ago it last clogged and we weren't going to be able to clean it and there was sugar everywhere, and that was a problem. But it's not going to be a problem. It'll be fine. God, I love management. Oh, the obligatory true crime goes. See, that's funny because I know enough that I can advertise, or well, I guess advertise, thumbnail, title, whatever, my video as like, this is chemistry true crime. I don't know like shit about true crime in all honesty. I don't think I've watched one true crime video on anything, and it's like it's kind of, I don't know, for some reason the true crime genre itself doesn't have interest to me. I don't really care about hearing about like individual psychopaths so much. I mean, sometimes I do, but mostly through Wendigo. But this is my shit. The U.S. Chemical Safety Board talking about factories exploding because management just said that, I don't know, is this really worth $10,000 in a month of time? And they said no. That's my crack to watch. That's my white girl juice that I consume on a regular basis. You figure this incident was from some deranged Yahoo blowing up the sugar? No, that's just... Well, hold on. I could at least scroll through some pieces of the video. Like, we have... what's a good image? Something like this. Is this the kind of workplace you'd like to be in, where there's so much sugar dust that you can barely breathe, and there's just 4 inches of dust accumulated like on every goddamn surface you could possibly imagine? Gigantic, like knee-deep piles, ankle-deep piles all around you. And then the solution from management is to have people clean the machines by using compressed air to spray more dust everywhere. Isn't that a great place to live or to work at? Fucked up. And then just a little bit goes off and boom, now you have powdered sugar everywhere interacting with oxygen, chain explosions, disaster happens. Yeah, pure lung damage. If this shit was what did I say earlier? If this shit was asbestos, that would be mesothelioma right then and there. I imagine that maybe the workers I'm guessing the workers maybe had like some basic level of mask, but they just didn't want to model it because modeling costs money. In making this video, but like even if they did, it's like it's such reprehensible working conditions. It's disgusting. I love this video as a result. it's so gross. I imagine it's also like in true crime, where the more deranged and disgusting the killer gets with their actions and methods of murder, the more interesting and hot that killer becomes to the audience. It's got to be some sexy criminal behind this for the white folks to thirst after. I mean, I know we said that earlier, but it's probably just some random middle manager. They probably don't got much going on in their lives. They're probably like 80 pounds overweight, and their gut probably precedes them everywhere they go. They're probably not very interesting, and they probably also I don't know. They probably think that like Clint Eastwood's the most interesting hero ever conceived, which might be an interesting protagonist, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that. True crime could be summarized as he was so difficult to catch. Meanwhile, the killer was living next to the police precinct. Yeah, it always seems like that. Just live under your nose, act normal, and then I can kill people. It's free. Yay. Sugars of Hell, followed by Inferno. Yeah, there's certainly some circles you get stuck in for manifesting something like this. I don't know. I could probably put one more on, given I usually have 30 minutes left to stream, and yeah, why not? Let's put on another one. Which ones do I want? Ooh, okay. This one, yes. I remember this one very well. A tragedy at the DuPont chemical facility.
The DuPont Company of Wilmington, Delaware, was founded in 1802 as a gunpowder manufacturer. By the early 20th century, DuPont had developed into a major chemical company and is today one of the largest chemical manufacturers in the world.
Good old DuPont. Thanks everything.
58,000 employees across 80 countries. DuPont has had a stated focus on accident prevention since its early days producing explosives. Over the years, DuPont management tried to drive the injury rate for workers to zero through improved safety practices. Eventually...
Okay, so what is funny with this, it's... I don't know if it's necessarily funny. It is a little odd. This video starts off with a very oddly positive skew to DuPont, which really makes it... Like, I would be rolling my eyes, and I think I really was rolling my eyes the first time I watched this video, because it's like, oh god, they're like sucking up to DuPont, typical corporate government relationship thing, right? But like, keep watching though. The veneer of DuPont being super safety oriented kind of starts to get chipped away in a pretty critical manner as we go through the video.
DuPont became recognized across industry as a safety innovator and leader.
Maybe they're better than other people, but I have no reference for that.
My name is Stanley. I'm at the DuPont plant in Bell, West Virginia. I need an ambulance immediately.
But DuPont's safety reputation was shaken in January of 2010, when 3 separate incidents occurred within 33 hours at the company's manufacturing plant in Bell, West Virginia, the last one fatal. The first involved an ongoing release of methyl chloride from process equipment that went unnoticed for 5 days. The following morning, highly corrosive oleum was released through a hole in process piping. And just 6 hours later, a transfer hose ruptured, releasing highly toxic phosgene.
So, yeah, to recap, the things that these are the 3 chemicals they're talking about. First, we have methyl chloride, the heavier cousin of dichloromethane, which I mentioned earlier in the stream. Actually, wait, no, sorry. That's chloroform. My bad. No, methyl chloride is the lighter cousin of dichloromethane. Just correct that real quick. So there we go. Yeah, so we have methyl chloride, often abbreviated as MECl. We had oleum, which is roughly, you can define it as this sulfur trioxide. Oleum. So really, it is actually, it is a super concentrated version of sulfuric acid. Oleum is often called above 100% sulfuric acid. Yeah, oleum, OLEUM. That is because if you take, so sulfuric acid has the following chemical structure. So we've got 2 sulfur oxygen double bonded groups. Then we have 2 sulfur oxygen single bonded groups with hydrogens also bonded to said oxygens. Those are the acidic hydrogens that actually do the acid chemistry. Oh, the third one. Yeah, we'll get to that. I'll get to that one in a second. So this would be sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid. So basically, if you look at the structure closely, oleum is essentially just what happens if you remove a water molecule from sulfuric acid. This, like this group and this hydrogen can combine, removed, you lose water. That is extremely hard to do because sulfuric acid is just a very stable, like, it's just a very stable structure. The reasons I could get into, but this is only so much a chemistry lesson. I don't have time for all of that. So taking water off of it is a pretty difficult feat. Oleum, as a result, is disturbingly chemically reactive to water. It is one of those chemicals that if you open it to the air, it will fume because it is actively reacting with the moisture in the air, turning back into sulfuric acid. And if you ever release oleum to the atmosphere, then you're essentially creating sulfuric acid clouds, which, as you can imagine, is pretty dangerous to living. So yeah, oleum is often considered, you can't really get pure oleum. You could, but like you'd be an insane person to ship that, and I don't think it would be legal. What is legal is to have mixed solutions of sulfuric acid and oleum. So like just removing some extra water from sulfuric acid by basically boiling it at extremely high temperatures and just driving off more of the water, doing some other chemical processes. And you have something that is just an aggressively acidic liquid. It is used for like pretty niche syntheses, but some things you do need because not only, if you can keep your chemistry water free, you can do other things than use water to attack this sulfur. You could have, different amine groups could attack the sulfur, and then you could have you could then start forming like sulfonamines, basically, which are useful groups for various different things. But yeah, that's a crazy chemical to have just leak into the facility. Messed up. Let's see. Chemistry was one of your worst sciences in school. Didn't help the teacher had a mentality of a drill sergeant. Yeah, no. Chemistry is really rough to teach. I've learned from like doing. I should put like my music back on. I'm not used to this React content game. But like, yeah, no. Chemistry is like really hard to teach, just from like the level of having been a graduate student teacher for recitation. Like, it's not fun because all the subjects really like kind of feed into each other. It's like a big circle of knowledge. There's not a really good jumping on point, but because academia as it's currently structured is not good at like going for like all the surface level versions of every top, like it's not good at starting and saying, okay, we're going to cover the shallow level version of topic A and then go to the shallow level version of topic B and then C and D and so forth until we are then ready to tackle like the next deepest level of topic A and the next deepest level of topic B. It more says, academia more often goes, we're going to just go through all of topic A and then go over to all of topic B. And that's really, it's shitty for a lot of subjects, but especially so for chemistry. Teaching Gen Chem is like nightmarish. I don't like it. So, I hope to do more chemistry stuff in the future too, because this stuff's important. At least to me it is. And having a baseline level of how chemistry works kind of helps prevent the, chemophobia, as it's often said within modern society, where if you see the ingredients list, people freak out, and it's like half the time it's like, it's not actually that bad if you just know what the chemical is. But I have that, benefit of, my education and my special interests, like being like focused on this stuff. Yeah, you could also have the Walter White simp. That could be a pretty bad chemistry teacher too. Both are not good. You want someone who can like understand things and be willing to go a little bit past what you're talking about. Be like, okay, so this makes sense in the future. We talk about this topic later. If you're having trouble understanding this part, go read chapter 8 for yourself, and you don't have to understand every word, but you'll kind of get what it's saying. Yes, but anyways, so the last chemical that they talked about, and the one that the video is going to be focusing on here, this is phosgene. Spell this out. Phosgene. So some of you might recognize this chemical. Because this was the chemical that was used as a chemical warfare agent in World War I. This is where you get all of those images of, let's see, phosgene World War I poster. That's where, yeah, you get these, geez, can I open this in a new tab, perhaps? Open image in new tab. That's stupidly small. I got a larger one? Open image in new tab. There we go. Yeah, that's where you get these posters from. It smells like musty hay, and what it does is that it, it's surprisingly it doesn't contain any phosphorus. I'm not sure why it's called phosgene necessarily. There's probably some Greek aspect to it that I don't understand either. But what it is really good at doing is just like oleum, how the sulfur in oleum is really good at taking up water or other, as we would call it, nucleophilic groups, because they have these lone pairs of electrons on the structure. Again, I can't get into all of it tonight, but that's basically the gist of it. This carbon is also extremely susceptible to attack by nucleophilic molecules, like water. Or, as in the case of why it was a good chemical warfare agent, all of the alcohol groups, that is ROH groups, in your and amine groups, so RNH2, all of these groups are basically your lungs. This is, and on most of your skin, honestly. So these are all like amino acid type things. I guess that would probably be better to write out. So like amino acid groups. So yeah, these yeah, being out in the trenches in World War I, if you ended up breathing this in, this is basically going to start adding these fragments to your, it'll start adding the CO fragments to pieces of your lungs, and it's also going to start releasing hydrochloric acid vapors within your lungs too. That's the big danger, because once like this oxygen or this nitrogen goes in and attacks the chlorine, what happens next is that the hydrogen gets kicked off, and you then have the hydrogen mixing with the chlorine that also gets kicked off, and now you have acid in your lungs. Congratulations, you're as good as dead. Phosgene is one of the most like frightening, disgustingly toxic chemicals that I know of. But the reason it's manufactured and used in industry so often is because it's like one of the very few good sources of single carbon atoms in synthesis that I also know of. It's not impossible to replace, but it's tricky. Phosgene is generally good for being very applicable to a lot of things, a lot of chemical processes, and so that's why it's like hard to just like get rid of, and that's why they're making it. But that's why this also needs like the utmost care in actually working with it. Yeah, I know, we gotta switch to Bing images eventually, but I do that in my free time. Yeah, you're being melted from the inside out, everything's burning, your skin's actively turning red because your skin's also made with amino acid proteins and such like that, and so that's slowly turning into hydrochloric acid. Not to also mention the fact that phosgene just being in the air is reacting with the water in the air, and therefore there's just hydrochloric acid vapors along with the phosgene vapors. Yeah, so like, pretty crazy stuff that they're making here. Somehow the methylene chloride is the least, or the methyl chloride they're making is somehow the least concerning thing there. That's like just a very heavy, like, I'm pretty sure that's a gas still. I don't know necessarily what that's used for, but it's probably the least concerning thing of the 3 things they listed. Oh, hey. Hey, look at that. Music from Mag Mammal 3 that I picked up. Anyways, back to the video. Yeah, so it's crazy stuff. I love chemistry. This is why I love chemistry. I get to rant about how crazily reactive some chemicals are, and for some reason it makes me happy.
Given the company's reputation as a safety leader, the Chemical Safety Board was especially concerned about this quick succession of 3 accidents at a major DuPont facility.
Particularly caused the disaster. That's why he showed up. You know,
highly toxic phosgene.
It was his teaser trailer, basically. I mean, he did work at CERN after all, right? Maybe he's just getting rid of the competition.
Virginia facility occupies more than 700 acres along the Kanawha River, 8 miles east of Charleston, the state capital. The plant produces a variety of chemicals. On January 17, 2010, one production unit was started up after extended maintenance. Methyl chloride produced in a reaction vessel flowed through an open rupture disc and escaped from an improperly located drain hole.
Oops.
The hazardous gas vented indoors in an area not frequented by workers. 5 days later, on January 22nd, an air monitor alarm inside the building alerted personnel of the release. Approximately 2,000 pounds of methyl chloride had escaped.
I will say one good thing is that at least their alarms fucking worked. Half the time I watch a CSB video, one of the problems is the alarm hadn't been maintained in the last 5 years, so it did not go off, and nobody was able to know that something had happened. The hazardous gas vented and knew he was the imposter. Shut.
When the rupture disc burst, an alarm was triggered. But our investigation found that due to a history of false alarms, operators came to view this alarm as a nuisance that could safely be ignored.
The following day,
that one's just the other side of the coin. If you're a safety person, sometimes you're arguing with upper management to be like, hey, fix the shit so the alarms work. And then the other half of the coin is you're arguing with everyday workers being like, hey, this is important. Even if there's a false alarm, you should still pay attention to these. No one wants to listen because everything's fine today. It's going to be fine tomorrow.
Plant operators discovered another release. Oleum, a concentrated form of sulfuric acid, had over time corroded piping in the plant's spent acid recovery unit. Steam from an attached copper tube mixed with the oleum and created a large hole in the pipe. Oleum escaped through the hole and formed a vapor cloud, discovered by workers shortly after 7 a.m. on January 23rd. Approximately 22 pounds of oleum was released.
Just look at the warping on that fucking pipe. That is just crazy. That's what oleum degradation does to a motherfucker. It's like melted skin. It's like so messed up. Like that's supposed to be like plastic and like wasn't it copper is another spot? It gives me chills thinking about how crazily reactive that stuff is. It created a oleum.
USCSB found that DuPont had a previous oleum leak, resulting in a company recommendation to conduct regular maintenance inspections of the oleum piping.
Brown recluse spider, yeah, it smells in the same way.
Ineffective communications between DuPont and its inspection contractors.
Oh, would you look at that? They didn't fix the problem from before.
The
Crazy.
Plant came just 6 hours after the oleum release, and it would prove fatal. It involved phosgene, an industrial chemical so toxic it was used as a chemical weapon in World War I.
Phosgene severely damages lung tissue. This can result in a deadly buildup of fluid in the lungs, which may not appear until hours after exposure.
Oh yeah, there's not to mention the fact that you're getting fluid in your lungs because like there's water and hydrochloric acid mixing in there, but also like the fact that once your lungs are damaged, it's like, oh no, it's damaged. Let me release some like healing. Your body's like, I'm going to release healing salves or whatever to make the inflammation less. But then it's like, oops, now there's tons of fluid in the lungs. Sorry, you're dying now of drowning. Yeah, you can also, I love that you could tell that one guy is like very, very Irish because of the way he pronounces phosgene. It's very charming.
The Bell plant's small lots manufacturing unit purchased phosgene in 1-ton cylinders from an outside chemical company. The plant used the phosgene to manufacture 5 different pesticide intermediates.
Pesticides.
The cylinders were stored in a 1-story, partially walled structure called a phosgene shed, which was open to the atmosphere.
Shed. Okay, so like, I'm gonna talk about it a little. I think they're gonna talk about it more in this video. I think I remember this, but like, while as absurd as it does sound to have an open air shed for this kind of shit, it kind of makes sense because like if it leaks, like it's almost better for it to just dissipate rather than collect within like a closed air structure where somebody might be working. Because like that, if that happens, they're like definitely dead if there's a leak in that area. Like there's no ifs, ands, and buts around it. If it's open, there's a decent chance they might be able to hit the bricks and just wind will take care of it, and like, you know, they'll be able to get to safety before anything happens to them. But also a shed, again, made of like shitty sheet metal plating, it's also not ideal either. You want to strike a balance between you know, sturdy coffin and tin shithouse. It's not easy to do.
During use, the cylinders were connected to other equipment by flexible braided stainless steel hoses. Inside each hose was a liner made of Teflon, or PTFE.
Microplastics.
One hose used nitrogen to pressurize the cylinder.
I guess as a chemistry aside, because I can't help myself. So Teflon, as we're maybe becoming more and more aware, because perfluorinated alkyl substances, or PFAS, if you've heard that acronym, has become more and more, you know, of a topic in the news because of the ongoing microplastic crisis. But let's see. Teflon essentially looks like this. I'm not sure if I have the structure exactly right, but it's a perfluoroalkylated substance. So what that basically means is that it has this alkyl chain, a bunch of carbons, that is fluorinated at every spot it can be fluorinated at. And the reason that it would be fairly good at resisting phosgene is that these fluorines, while they do have lone pairs to potentially do some attacking action on the carbon, it's very unlikely. Fluorine carbon bonds are some of the strongest anything carbon bonds known, meaning they're just very stable, and it takes a ton of energy to like actually break those bonds. So it is actually very chemically resistant. That's why Teflon is actually really nice material for so many different applications that need chemical resistance or heat resistance or not to be sticky or anything like that. But as we'll see, it's not perfect.
Pushing the liquid phosgene into the manufacturing process.
So yeah, nitrogen in, pushes
An
liquid
electronic
phosgene out.
scale recorded the weight of each cylinder. And when it was nearly empty, an alarm sounded in the control room. An operator then closed valves to the empty cylinder and opened valves to a second full cylinder.
I'm still surprised this is like not an automated process.
The container were purged of phosgene with nitrogen. The empty cylinder was then replaced with a new one on the weigh scale. On the day prior,
I also love how they conveniently like swivel the camera around the dark metal girders over here, so that way they don't have to redraw the steel and Teflon piping being disconnected. It's just such a fun like way they hide like okay, I'm not animating this. Instead, I will animate this.
Prior to the fatal phosgene release, operators were experiencing flow problems with one of the hoses and began switching between cylinders to avoid disruption to the chemical process. In the course of switching cylinders,
disrupting the
valve
chemical
was
process
closed on a partially full cylinder. However, the hose was not purged, allowing pressure to build as the liquid phosgene inside warmed up.
Oh yeah, I guess that's a good point to make. So like why this would happen why would the phosgene in the line that wasn't purged out would expand is because, like, in these cylinders, it's highly pressurized. That's why the phosgene is a liquid when normally phosgene is a gas. But being in these just regular old tubes, well, not regular old tubes, but, you know, they're not giant drums built to withstand high pressures. The phosgene will eventually kind of start expanding the tube a little bit, and because it's like a small area and more exposed to the outside world, yeah, it's going to get heated, and eventually that's going to stop being hyper-pressurized liquid phosgene and turn into regular pressurized gaseous phosgene. And as, you know, is commonplace knowledge from a chemistry class, gas takes up more space than liquid, and so a burst is going to happen, not to mention even just the pressure differential.
Sometime between 1:45 and 2 p.m. on January 23rd, a worker was inspecting one of the cylinders when the pressurized hose suddenly burst. He was sprayed across his chest and face with a lethal dose of phosgene.
Ouch.
Another worker was exposed to the deadly gas, and a third was potentially exposed, but neither reported any symptoms. A total of 2 pounds of phosgene was released to the atmosphere. Small concentrations of the dangerous chemical were detected by monitors at the plant's fence line. The worker who had been sprayed with phosgene called for help and was transported to a local hospital. 4 hours later, the worker's condition began to deteriorate rapidly, and despite medical treatment, he died a day after the accident.
The fucking cut of the beam to fade him away.
The CSB found the permeability of the transfer hoses to phosgene was a key factor in the accident.
During our investigation, we found that the PTFE line stainless steel hoses in use at the Bell plant are particularly susceptible to failure when using phosgene. That is because the phosgene can seep through the permeable PTFE lining and corrode the stainless steel.
Yeah, so it turns out that actually the problem with the lining or on the tube is not the PTFE, the Teflon. That's still chemically resistant. The chemical problem is not necessarily that it's Teflon. The problem is that Teflon is not good at keeping phosgene in. It's able to the phosgene can like seep through the molecular cracks because just there isn't enough good molecular force to like keep the phosgene on one side. It's kind of like soaking a paper towel in water. A lot less extreme and a lot more slow, but not one good enough, and then phosgene will very easily react with the metal on the other side of the hose.
We also learned that another phosgene hose nearly failed in the same manner and was discovered just hours before the fatal phosgene release, but this did not prompt an investigation.
DuPont's standard operating procedure requires replacement of hoses in phosgene service every 30 days. However, by the day of the accident, January 23, 2010, the phosgene hoses had not been changed in over 7 months.
Again, I gotta love the managerial wherewithal to say, nah, we're not gonna replace this in 30 days. We're gonna do it like, in 210 days or later even. It doesn't matter. Who wrote this thing? It's they're crazy. We don't need to replace it. It's not breaking.
The software used to manage maintenance at the Bell plant had been modified, and it no longer notified operators when to replace the hoses.
Yeah, no one keeps track anymore. It's just on the machines.
The hoses remained in use much longer than the prescribed service life. Documents obtained during the CSB investigation showed that as far back as 1987, DuPont officials realized the hazards of using the braided stainless steel hoses lined with Teflon or PTFE. An expert employed at DuPont recommended the use of hoses lined with Manel, a strong metal alloy used in highly corrosive conditions. The DuPont official stated,
decades,
admittedly, the Manel hose will cost
not
more
replace
than its
it because it's
stainless
expensive.
counterpart. However, with proper construction and design so that stresses are minimized, useful life should be much greater than 3 months. Costs will be less in the long run, and safety will also be improved. But the CSB found that the Bell plant never followed the recommendation to install the more durable Monell hoses. The CSB determined there are
fuckers.
safer ways that DuPont could have run its phosgene operation. For example, phosgene cylinders should have been kept in an enclosure equipped with a ventilation system and a scrubber. If the
More
enclosure
dedicated
were
ventilation
designed
instead
for
of the
human
outside.
entry, workers should have been required to wear fully encapsulated protective equipment.
Could have been wearing
Documents from
full-body
1988
respirators.
show that DuPont considered building an enclosure for the phosgene operation, but then decided against it. One DuPont official wrote, "It may be that in the present circumstances the business can afford $2 million for an enclosure. However, in the long run, can we afford to take such action which has such a small impact on safety and yet sets a precedent for all highly toxic material activities?"
If we spend money to properly enclose this one hazardous chemical this time, we might have to spend more money to enclose other hazardous chemicals in the future. That's not something we can commit to. That's money. That's the bottom line.
DuPont decided not to enclose the phosgene unit at that time, but the potential for a deadly release remained a concern. The danger was noted in a 2004 process hazard analysis, which recommended constructing an enclosure equipped with a scrubber. Originally, the enclosure was scheduled to be completed by December 2005, but the deadline was extended 4 times and still had not been met in January 2010, when the fatal phosgene release occurred.
Keep delaying it.
Without an
No
enclosure
worries.
around the phosgene operation, no barriers were present to prevent phosgene from exposing operators or traveling off-site.
Industry groups have established various good practices for the safe handling of phosgene and other highly toxic materials in compressed gas cylinders. The CSB found that the most comprehensive guidelines are those set forth by the National Fire Protection Association, or NFPA.
The CSB recommended that industry organizations such as the Compressed Gas Association and the American Chemistry Council adopt the more stringent guidelines of the NFPA for the safe handling of phosgene and other highly toxic gases. And the CSB called on OSHA to update its compressed gas safety standard to include modern safeguards for toxic gases.
Instead of using those
The
70s
CSB recommended
safeguards.
these improved safeguards include secondary enclosures for units using phosgene, mechanical ventilation systems, emergency phosgene scrubbers, and automated audible alarms.
So DuPont's safety record is completely
we found that
destroyed
each of the
that
3
day.
serious incidents at DuPont's Bell plant was preceded by another event or series of events. However, these early warnings and near misses did not result in action to prevent them from recurring.
The CSB recommended that the DuPont Bell facility revise its near-miss reporting and investigation policy to emphasize anonymous participation by all employees, so that minor problems can be addressed.
Participate in complaining
before they
anonymously.
become
Fear
serious.
backlash. It sucks.
The incidents at DuPont show that tragedies can occur even at companies with highly regarded safety cultures. Safer practices and proper attention to near misses are critical if a company is to reach a zero incident goal, such as the one to which DuPont aspired. Thank you for watching this CSB safety video.
Well, they may have aspired it, but they said that $2 million and potential ongoing costs to make things safer just wasn't worth it. So, yeah, you can kind of smell the hypocrisy. It's a shame, too, you know? Chemicals got to come from somewhere, but, you know, as always, profits over people kind of stuff. Well, anyways, on that depressing note, I hope that you all enjoyed me talking about my special interest today and my career and the thing that I love so much, being chemistry. I actually get to re-inject some chemistry back into this channel, even, you know, to represent part of what my model is based off of. It's nice. I hope in the future to, you know, I do want to react to some more chemistry content going forward. I think for the channels I have my eyes on for when new videos release that I might consider react content is Nile Red and Explosions in Fire. Probably still my 2 favorite chemistry-based channels for very different reasons. But, you know, between them and the USCSB, I think if new videos get released from any of those channels, I feel like reacting to them. I like doing it. There's a sense of humor that I feel I can bring, and a sense of expertise to it. So if you actually like the React content, I know it's kind of slop, but if you actually like sitting here along with me, you know, I'd really appreciate, you know, liking the video, sharing it, subscribing, all that shit. And I mean, just commenting. Tell me if you actually want more of these. I mean, I'm going to try a couple more times, but, you know, if this fits the channel, if it doesn't fit your interests, I'd like to hear it, because this is very different and strange for me to be doing in comparison to, you know, any of the other usual gaming content on the channel. So, yeah, with that, I think I'm going to conclude things for the night. I'm fairly tired myself. So, you know, I hope you enjoy your night. I hope you don't, remember, kids, to close your phosgene containers, and, you know, make sure that you don't have, you're not knee deep in sugar dust around your house. If these things are happening to you, you need a safer house. And by that, I mean you need to maintain your shit. So, yep, good night. Have a good one, everybody. See you for X7 on Monday, and Doom 2 on Tuesday. Don't forget, new game. Checking out that new game, that new old game. So, yeah, have a good night, everyone. Bye.